where we do then go on this journey of exploration of like, why are you looking at the world the way that you are, which is resulting in this type of behavior in your day-to-day life. And what, thinking about why do you do that in the first place? It must have served you at some point. And so why is that? And why maybe are you in a situation now where it's not? And then what are some different things that we can do? And so in that exploration, we are thinking about thought processes, really helping people pull out assessments that they have that they're treating like facts in their lives. It's about helping them see that's just an assessment that you have. It's not a fact, but they might be living like that is a fact.
Welcome to the Wholesome Healing Collective.
Join us on our podcast for a journey into the hearts of healers from all walks of life, diving deep as we explore meaningful conversations that have the power to inspire, empower, and share life-changing wisdom.
Through this community, we hope to create a welcoming environment where our listeners leave feeling nurtured and uplifted. We're so delighted you are here. My name is Alyssa.
And I'm Renee. Grab a drink, get cozy, and let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Wholesome Healing Collective podcast. We are so honored to have Megan Brummel here today joining us. Megan is a leadership development facilitator and certified coach and an insights discovery distributor and licensed practitioner. We're so excited to expand on that a little bit later. But to kick us off, Megan, what is your favorite self-care practice?
My favorite self-care practice is our slow mornings. And particularly what that looks like is having my cup of coffee with my coconut creamer and sitting out on my deck. If the weather is nice, I love that. And just slowing down, listening to nature, and then actually doing some devotional time in the Bible. So it's just a really good time to slow down, be reflective, and be like open to receiving the Word of God and the Spirit. And I'm typically a very busy and have a frenetic energy. So having time in the morning to actually just like slow down first and be reflective is really important for me. And I find it very grounding. Yeah.
I love that. Definitely want to steal that for tomorrow and sit on my patio with my book and my coffee. That sounds like a much needed morning ritual. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I love having slow mornings. I feel like when I was younger, I was such an early bird person where it was just get up and go, get up and go, get up and go. And now I'm so protective of that morning time. It's like, no, this is the time to be quiet. I love it when I get up before everyone else too, where it's just me.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to really slow down in the morning because it is very much like get up and go. You think about all the things that you have on your list for the day or that you want to do that day. And so to actually have some of that in your awareness and then say, but first I'm going to slow down is a little bit of a dynamic there that you kind of have to work with sometimes. And so, yeah, sometimes I do find it hard every now and then, but I'm pretty intentional about saying, nope, I really need this.
So powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I love hearing about how people's paths led them to the different healing modalities that they're bringing into the world. And I always find that we all have our unique story and challenges that we've overcome that have led us to learn these different teachings for ourselves. And then, of course, we always find so much value out of them that we've got to share them with people. And that leads us to the path of service. So I would love to hear your story and what led you here to now bringing forward this program that we're going to dive into and all of your other amazing offerings that you have as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that have happened in my life that have like led me to where I am now. And so when I think about my origin story, like it really does go back to my birth, like kind of just the childhood environment. Um, so I'll just start by originally I'm from Omaha, Nebraska area, and was I'm the firstborn in my family. It's me and my sister. And growing up, not too far into my childhood, my parents divorced. And so with living that kind of separate lifestyle with mom some of the time, with dad some of the time. And my mom got remarried when I was about 6 or 7. And so had a stepfather around for a really, actually, until I moved out of the house when I was like 18, 19. So that's kind of like the general family situation. Within that, um, I think unfortunately a lot of people can relate to the whole like divorced parent thing where as a kid like you do feel really divided between like your loyalties too of like your mom, your dad, and whatever dynamics are going on between them too affect you as a kid, and um, how you show up. And when it does come to those loyalties, you kind of feel pulled in one direction, unfortunately, sometimes. But the thing that resulted from that for me was this mindset of like I had to be a good kid and be very performance driven to receive love and attention, because there were so many things going on in my parents' life. And unfortunately, my stepfather, he was an alcoholic, and so he was pretty verbally abusive to us. And um, I don't want to, everybody has their struggles and challenges. So I don't want to like shame any of my parents here, but this is part of my story. Um, so because of that, my mom was kind of in her own world, and having to kind of go through and fight her battles. So my perception of the situation was my sister and I were kind of left to fend for ourselves in certain ways. And that's where this whole performance mindset was ingrained even more, because it's like, as a kid, you're like, pay attention to me, like, love me. And so I was a really pretty good kid, very driven to get like good grades, not break the rules, and oftentimes found myself like mothering my younger sister, which is a whole other story, that relationship. Um, and so just I took on a lot of responsibility that wasn't necessarily like given to me in a way that's like, Megan, you are now responsible for this. I kind of took this on myself in my little childhood mind. um, and kind of was just living life. And when I was about 17, I actually, let me back up before, because I was so hungry and desperate for love and attention and validation. I often found that in male relationships. So, like early on in my childhood, into my teens, like I always had a boyfriend. I was like a serial dater. um, and when I was about 17, there's one particular heartbreak that I had that was really difficult for me. And through this situation, I actually felt so just empty, because he was my world. He was where all my validations and feelings of worth were being stored. And all of a sudden, that relationship was cut off and was done. And so I was very just alone and on the floor. And that's where I found God, and became like what I would say, I became a Christian. I became saved and recognized that he will never desert me, and he loves me just because I am, not because of anything I do. Like it's not works based at all. It's just because. And that's actually been a concept, even growing into adulthood, that I've really had to try to grasp a lot, of like really understanding like what does that mean, because it was so foreign to me. On like, wait a minute, like this world operates very much in a, you do XYZ and you get XYZ reward. And so like a total mindset shift. And it's still something today that I have to continually be aware of, like reworking in my mind. And so, yeah. Did you were you to say anything, Alyssa? You look like you were about to.
I'm just over here saying, wow, like this story is really, really cool. And I love that you found that validation and that love from God. Like it didn't need to be like a person in your life or just another boyfriend. Like it's that all encompassing love.
Yeah. And what I got from that was a sense of, I don't need to get that from other people. And ultimately, like when I got married and like my husband now, instead of putting those actually really heavy expectations on him, like I don't have to put them on him, because unfortunately as humans, like we will occasionally disappoint each other. And so it's a lot of expectation to put on another person to be like, love me perfectly. And I didn't, so I don't have that. Like he is not my main source. I absolutely love my husband, I adore him. He is my rock, but in the same vein, like he's not my ultimate source of that love and energy, to then give out to other people in the world. Well, how this kind of connected to like where I am right now in my career. After college, I taught high school English for 4 years in South Dakota. My husband and I got married and moved, and was a really neat experience having no support system and all of a sudden creating our own community there. I really loved teaching, and what I loved the most was that mentorship that I had with my students, and helping them to see that their worldview is not the only way of looking at the world. And unfortunately, a lot of the ways that they were thinking, I noticed, were limiting what they thought that they could do. And so I loved like inspiring and motivating them to see and realize I can do all these really cool things and amazing things. I can move away. I don't need to go to this college that everybody else goes to. Like I can go to this other one and I can achieve these things. And even small things in the classroom that they thought they couldn't do, like finishing a book from front cover to end cover. And the joy that I got from just seeing them do that. I'm like, look at you. I get lit up by that. I love it. And then my husband and I, we were really wanting to move to a more mountainous state because we love to hike and backpack. And so we moved over to Bozeman, and I certainly was looking for other teaching jobs because I did enjoy it. But I thought, just in case, I'm going to look elsewhere, and ended up at a leadership development company in Bozeman called Leadership Outfitters. And in working with them, all these things that like I would say God was working on in my heart, like it just like exploded even more so. It's like all these like initial realizations I had just continued to grow, like and multiply in ways that I didn't think could happen. It's like I had those realizations and it's like, okay, that's it. But that wasn't true. And so working with them, I was actually coached and went through a lot of their training programs myself. And so the areas of really evaluating what are some of my limiting beliefs that I've like carried with me all this time. And that one that I mentioned before of like my worth is defined by what I do. So that was one that I was able to scratch at a little bit more and figure out what does that look like right now in my life. And I recognize, man, it's a heavy weight to carry. It has actually served me well. Like I said before, like I was a good student. I actually graduated college early because I was like so driven. And a lot of that drive was because of that belief that I was carrying. But then living out the world in my career, it was actually starting to weigh me down. And I was very guilt and shame driven. because of it. And so like if somebody were to give me a piece of feedback, it would be really, really hard for me, because if I evaluate my worth on what I do and somebody says, hey, in this area, you didn't do it perfectly. Oh my gosh, like that kind of like takes those legs out from underneath me. And so I got to see like, hey, I'm still carrying that with me in certain parts of my life. And then what do I want to do about it? And then the other area too, other big limiting belief that I saw I was carrying was I have to be responsible for this or bad things will happen. Like that was like this mantra in my mind. And so not only was I carrying this belief of like your worth is dependent on what you do, which often led to shame and guilt, but then it was like also a big fear motivator. Like if I don't do XYZ, bad things will happen. And so fear was a big motivator for me. And it just was so darn heavy. Like I was often like reactive with people. And when people comment on some of the best parts that they see in me, they're like, Megan, you're so like light and like joyful. But I didn't feel that way, like truly inside, because of these things. And so being able to notice it and then grow out of it and recognize, okay, now what do I want to do about it? Who am I actually? Who did God create me to be? And let me live in that instead of living in these things that I've took on because of my life experience and the things that I went through. So shedding that and taking on who I actually am and my being. And then in addition to that too was working with emotions a lot. So growing up, I was like shoved emotions down. I didn't really have a good vocabulary for identifying even how I feel, or like a nuanced view of emotions other than happy, sad, mad. Having more of a nuanced language to describe how I felt and then what it actually meant, like befriending those emotions sometimes, even when the world says like anger might not be a good thing. But instead of just saying, oh, it's not good, I'm going to shove it away, actually looking at it and saying, why are you showing up here? Because there is some reason. And so in my mind, I always think about it like befriend it. Don't look at it as the enemy, befriend it, learn what it has to teach you. And then I get to choose what I want to do with that. Do I want to move on and let it go and say, thank you for serving me at that time. It doesn't serve me anymore. And I'm going to move on from that. And so these were skills that I learned through working at Leadership Outfitters and being coached and going through some of their training programs that just changed how I showed up, where I actually could show up in my core self of being a light of possibility and just joyful in my being with other people. And people around me noticed it too. Like my bosses at that time were like, wow, you've really transformed, and loved ones in my life too. And so I'm like, I can't keep this a secret. Like, I really want to do this. And that's what led to me getting my facilitator license in the Insights Discovery personality profile, and then going through a coaching certification program. And just last year, actually, my former bosses at Leadership Outfitters decided they want to move towards retirement and start winding their business down. So they actually sold me the Insights Discovery distributorship, that portion of their business. And now I've been operating on my own as Wayfinders Leadership, and using that tool in the work that I do with people, most often in like the corporate and professional setting, and then growing from there. Yeah, so that's long-winded. I hope that that's okay. But it's like there's so much to a person and why they are who they are and how they show up the way that they do. And so that's a lot of my origin story.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. I definitely can resonate, and I felt like my heart full in some of those pieces that you shared, where it was like, oh yeah, I can totally relate to that feeling of that achiever mentality and that finding worth in our work and that validation from other people, that's definitely been a journey of untangling that I started to go on probably 5 or so years ago. And I still feel like I'm untangling it, like there's been all of these layers that I've peeled away, and I still catch myself sometimes clinging on to some of those identities of the work titles and all of those things that I've previously gotten that recognition or validation from, and just continuing to reflect on how to step into that more full and whole feeling of being loved beyond anything that I do, any identity, any mask that I wear. And it's such a journey, but it's such a beautiful journey to go on, and to just begin to recognize those little ways where, oh, I used to really care about that, or I would have gotten really activated by that, but actually I'm okay, because I know that regardless of that outcome, I'm still worthy. And
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm curious, in that process, and I'm sure this has been practices that have compounded over the years, and you probably share this in your teachings as well, but maybe sharing a little bit of some of your practices on how you've stepped into that opening up to the unseen love that we get to absorb and connect to and be connected to constantly with God and with source and whatever name that we want to title it, as we step away from getting our validation from the exterior world and whatever it is, whether it was work or parents or friends or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, before I answer that too, I do want to caveat it with like I'm on that journey as well. Like it is a continued journey. Like I have not arrived. In fact, this whole challenge of running my own business this last year, like a lot of the things that I thought I had under some good control 4 years ago, I'm like, boop, there they are right in front of my face again. And so I do want to say it certainly is a continued journey. And for everybody, as you're on that journey, to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
The path to like mastery and whatever is a path. Like there's never an actual end to it. So it's like, yeah, so I just want to say that. But what are some things that I do to practices I put on to remember those things? I think one is making sure I am aware of when those negative thought patterns are coming up. So just a general, like when I'm starting to see red flags in my behavior. And so sometimes that will look like I'm talking to somebody and maybe they do give me some feedback. And then afterwards, I'm like sitting and ruminating on that for a certain amount of time. Like that's a red flag for me. I'm like, okay, what am I doing here with that? Am I again taking that on as that's not, Megan, you're not worthy, you're not good? Or yeah, so that's one thing, is noticing kind of my red flags of when I am going into those patterns of thinking. And then the other thing is practices such as like journaling. And I've been recently going on gratitude walks. So people talk about like gratitude journaling. Sometimes it's hard for me to like sit down and do that and stay still. And so I will go on my walk and I'll actually just use my audio function on my phone and just be talking about things I'm grateful for. And then also wins that I am making, because when I go into this whole performance mindset, I'll only look at the negative things. I don't actually look at the things that I am contributing to others and to the world. And so really being able to acknowledge some of those things and then acknowledge them, not just to be like, look what I did, like these, but acknowledging them and saying, I did these things because of who I am. And that alone is why I am worthy and why God loves me, is just because it's my natural giftings that allow me to make those wins. And so really taking the time to acknowledge that. And then finally, I would say another thing that I do is it's really important for me to be rooted in, like you said, like in God, in my source of life and love. And that does look like being in the word, and then being really plugged into a community of believers that are helping and encouraging me and speaking truth to me, often, because it's like am living not by truth. And so when somebody can remind me and help point that out in me, it's helpful, because the brain is like, this actual brain science is like, we're geared to protect ourselves. And so oftentimes just going internal by yourself can be really hard, especially when you are at that level and you're like, I've got awareness and I know that there's something here, I just can't see it. And can be extremely frustrating. And so having people in your life, like mentors and coaches, that can kind of walk with you through that and say, like, here are some things I'm seeing. Like, what are you believing right now? What is, like, the word of God say? Like, what would be more helpful for you to believe and live out of? So the community part's really important.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I think sometimes we can get stuck on this, like the self-work and the self-actualization or self-development. We think it's so much of just an inward journey, and I've got to figure this out and read the books and do the practices and journal and meditate and all these things. And there's so much that can be gained just in being community with others that are going to lift you up and support you and reflect back to you those things that we need to remember and have those truths spoken to us. So I love that you mentioned
Yeah.
that.
I'd love for you to expand on your style of coaching and then explain what insights discovery is.
Yeah. So I feel like my business is kind of split into two separate focuses. They certainly relate, but like the clients I get in are sometimes like, hey, we want to do some like team development, more facilitation. That's why I call myself a facilitator and coach. And then that sometimes will lead into the coaching piece. And so if you don't mind me talking about insights first, because that's kind of what I see flows into coaching often. So insights discovery is a personality profile that a person takes, and it's very, very customized to who you are. So insights uses a 4-color model, but we are a unique combination of these 4 colors or 4 typings, that creates the unique us. And when people complete the assessment and get their report, they get a 21-page report talking about, like, what are some of your strengths, what are some of your weaknesses, your communication do's and don'ts, blind spots, and there's like a management chapter on, like, what do you need to be managed well, how do you tend to manage, what motivates you, things like that. And what I found is it's a really good avenue for people to start this journey of self-awareness. So, and I shouldn't say just start, like it could be at any point in your journey of self-awareness, but it's a really nice tool to evoke some new awarenesses, to begin thinking about and challenging about, why am I the way that I am? The thing that I like about the tool the most is it is an awareness tool, and it's not geared towards you staying in that all the time. So the message in the facilitation that I give a lot is, this is an FYI of what you trend towards in the way you live, but we want to have an awareness to start thinking about it a little bit more objectively and think about is this actually how I want to be? Is this helpful for me or is it not? And what are some other things and behaviors I can try on to be more effective in communicating with people, for example, or in completing tasks in your job, or in what you want to do next in your career. That's the thing that I really like about the tool. It just helps people give an awareness, and it's a good starting point. That does sometimes lead to coaching, because people will see things and they'll say, this is a really interesting part that the report said about me. And by the way, this is a little side note on the tool. It is so customized that like your report, the odds that you will find somebody who has the same readout as you is a 1 out of 1 in 24 zeros. So that's how customized it is. And I do find most of my clients think it's very accurate, at like between like an 85 and 95% accuracy. And so when people do look at it and they say, oh, there's this thing that it said about me that they agree with, they're like, but it's really interesting, I want to dig into that more. That's where we can then, it lends itself well into coaching, where we do then go on this journey of exploration of like, why are you looking at the world the way that you are? Which is resulting in this type of behavior in your day-to-day life. And thinking about, why do you do that in the first place? It must have served you at some point. And so why is that? And why maybe are you in a situation now where it's not? And then what are some different things that we can do? And so in that exploration, we are thinking about thought processes, really helping people pull out assessments that they have that they're treating like facts in their lives. So let me come up with an example here. Somebody might have the assessment that, okay, let's say they're an entrepreneur and they decided, I'm going to start working in corporate America. I want that security of my day-to-day paycheck, but they have some uncomfortability about it and they don't really know why. Well, they could be carrying this assessment that people in corporate America are just robots. I'm just throwing out something random there. And that's kind of a generalization sometimes that people have. So let's say that's an assessment that they're carrying. And it's about helping them see that's just an assessment that you have. It's not a fact, but they might be living like that is a fact. And being able to dive into like, why do you have that belief? Because assessments can be grounded, but dig into it so they can actually see some truth and be like, oh, that isn't true. And once they see some of that truth, it actually gives them room to be like, whoa, and let go of that assessment or parts of that assessment. And then the other piece too, in that exploration of why are you the way that you are, is the emotional piece. And so helping people to recognize when, the entrepreneur who wants to move into corporate America and they are feeling comfortable about it, they might not always know right away they are uncomfortable because they carry that assessment. They might not be aware of it in that moment. And so sometimes it's about going at the emotions and going like into, what does that make you feel, helping them to articulate that, and then unwrapping what might be behind that emotion. And so if it's fear, like going into, okay, what are you afraid of, helping them unravel that. And they might say, oh, I'm afraid that I'm going to be tied to my desk all day. And it's like, okay, and what does that say? Like, what are the beliefs behind that? And getting to the bigger master assessment that they might be carrying that's keeping them from doing what they say they want to do. Or maybe even redirecting them altogether and they say, no, I still do believe that. And I still think that's true. So that gives me good information to then make some other decisions in my life, instead of going into that corporate America space. So it's very much like, I'm not telling them what's right or wrong. They get to decide that for themselves. I'm just helping uncover some of their ways of thinking for them to help to make those decisions and have those awarenesses.
I love that. I was like picturing an archaeologist like brushing away all the dirt on a dinosaur, and you're like uncovering all of the truth and like it's so silly.
Yes, no, actually, that's so interesting because my mentor coach Her like core image of herself in her coach was soulful archaeologist. So I love that you
Wow.
said that. Yeah.
That is a great visual too, because it's like all the layers of dirt and dust are like all these conditionings and stories and the justification. You know, we have this base level belief, and then we develop all this evidence that we store in our brain as all the evidence as to why this is true. And then you peel back all those layers, and it's like, oh, wait, maybe it's not fully true. Maybe there are pieces that are true, or maybe it's true in certain times, but it's not a blanket true or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's
And
cool.
that's that, you know, methods of getting to that truth too. That's why I really appreciate what you guys do, is because you have more of that expertise of like actually going into the body and evoking some of those awarenesses through that, because that is an avenue to bring awareness to those things as well. Because it's a lot of it, we can get tangled up in our head. And so maybe letting go of that sometimes and going into our body can actually give us some uh, quicker clarity on some of those things than thinking through it just in our minds. Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful when we link the two, when we get both on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, which is why we're coming together for this women's development program called Evoke, bringing
Mm.
both
Yay.
worlds
I'm
together.
excited to hear more about this. What
Yeah.
what spurred this little sprout of coming together and bringing your modalities into one vision?
I reached out to Megan, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Spirit just led me to reach out, and she actually responded, which is pretty rare. So Spirit must have been talking to you too. And we met up and walked around the park for an hour and just talked about what each of us do. And I was like, let's see if we can like do something together. And one thing led to the next. And now we have an 8-session program that we're building. And it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it. Alyssa, I'm so glad you reached out to me, because for a couple of months leading up to that, I had been thinking about like, do I want to do some type of collaborative thing with somebody? And I had some like hesitancies about it. And then you just out of the blue are like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, okay, this is like, I've been thinking about this and now it's right in front of my face. And so I was like, let's say yes. And kind of, yeah, we're like, let's do some like exploratory stuff. What would it look like? What would we teach? And then it kind of just, we were like, yeah, we're doing this. um,
Yeah. Yeah. And the name Evoke kind of just came from the whole process of like, what is it that we want to do? And it's evoking everyone's true essence, like their true self, finding that authenticity. And the insights discovery is like the backbone to the program, where then we can kind of take that information and work through the darker side and integrate those pieces, highlight the light side and embody those pieces, and then uncover like purpose and mission and why, and really like bring that to life again through like somatics, but also bringing in some of your style of coaching with the languaging and the assessments and all of those pieces. So it's a really beautiful marriage of both of our skill sets.
yeah. And it really, it's geared towards people, and I think it's geared towards women. I think this is going to be a large audience, but women who are just kind of going about life, and they are carrying around some like level of heaviness, like what I was explaining earlier in my journey. Like I just felt heavy at times, and that is kind of what it's like geared towards. You feel heavy, or maybe you just don't feel super on fire about life, and you just feel like you're going through the motions. Maybe you're disconnected from what you do or the people in your life. This is really going to help you uncover why that might be, because there is a reason why. And so we're going to help you to uncover that and then rework, like Alyssa said, who are you truly? And living from that instead of living from things that you might be carrying unnecessarily.
Amazing. I loved your story and how you shared that feeling of at one point the outside world saw a certain version of you as being, bright and shining your light, and you didn't always feel like that was fully true on the inside. And I know I can definitely resonate with that. People have always thought of me as like the optimistic and always finding the silver lining and being relatively happy. And sometimes I have found myself more in the past than now, but feeling like an imposter, where
Mm.
that is what I wanted to be and that's what I wanted to put out in the world, but I didn't always feel like that on the inside. And I can imagine there are others that, have built this identity and maybe don't feel like they're fully aligned inside to what they're wanting to step into. And the tools that you two are going to offer is just going to help people step into their fullest essence and what they want to embody, and peel back all of those limiting beliefs and layers of whatever conditioning they're holding in their mind and in their body. And it's going to be so good.
Yeah. The thing that is coming into my mind when I just was listening to what you were saying is like, for the people who identify with that particular storyline of like, yeah, people around me see this side of me that I don't truly feel to myself. And that part of you that they see, that is part of who you are. It really is. And the question in my mind is like, just even asking myself personally is, if I'm giving my best self, who I am, to those around me, why am I not giving that to myself?
Yeah.
Why not? Like there's something there on why. And for me, like also, like immediately I'm like, because I feel like not deserving. And so it just comes back to this, like reworking through that. And it's like, that's why my practices are very much like, give it to myself. But yeah, that was like just really, for those of you who are out there who feel like that, like why not give your best to yourself, because you are worth that.
Mm.
So these sessions are in person in Bozeman, Montana. We start in September and we'll be meeting twice monthly through December. So I'll put all of the details in the show notes and a link to find out even more information. Is there anything else you want to speak about the program as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think one thing that we are being very intentional in creating in this program is a community of women. So we do all have different experiences, but there is like a commonality that we often share in some of those things. And just being able to be there for each other and supporting and listening is going to be really important for Alyssa and I. We've had like a lot of conversations around like, yeah, here's the things we're going to be equipping them with, but how do we really create community? How can we be intentional about that? So after the program is over, the participants have long lasting relationships to come back to. And it's not just me and Alyssa they have to come back to. They're going to have a bunch of other women that they can help sustain that learning with. And that's really important for us because, I mean, for me, community is a basic human need. And so we want to live that out in the program.
I'm so glad you touched on that. It's a huge piece.
Yeah, that is huge. Yeah, it makes my heart warm thinking about that, just knowing how much Alyssa and I have gained from our experience in the programs that led us to creating community together, and how much we've continued to grow in these last couple of years since leaving those programs, and just having people that we can connect with and put words to what we're feeling, what we're processing, what we're embodying. We don't Sometimes the people that we're already surrounded with, and especially if we don't have the languaging yet, as we're stumbling through that and we're learning and we're gaining that language, it can be hard to share that with other people who aren't gaining that language and going through those same experiences. So having that community that can relate to all of the different challenges that arise and can hold loving space when there are no words, and can just be there for you and allow you to go through that process, and that growth is just so special. I love that you're prioritizing that in your program.
Yeah. So where can our audience find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn at just Megan Brummel, MEGANBRUMMEL. And then I just got a Facebook for myself and for my business like a month ago. So you can find me there as well, Megan Brummel, or my business page is Wayfinders Leadership. My website is wayfindersleadership.com. So any of those methods, that's where you can find me.
Beautiful. Any parting messages?
I think just maybe echoing that sentiment of you are worthy just because of who you are, and knowing who is that? Who are you truly in your core, your best self, and you're deserving to receive that as well as those in your life. Yeah, I think that's kind of that big awareness that I got just listening to you say that, Renee, kind of speak through that. So
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was so great to have Megan on as a guest talking about our program and her business, and we hope to see you again next time. Thanks so much.